The unsigned contract, I want to talk about that as well. It's got to be one of the issues employers most frequently raise with their lawyer, usually with a degree of trepidation in the context of enforceability of contractual terms. Now, signed contracts are ideal. It's not just good practice to have them for all employees. It helps to show you've complied with the legal requirement to give an employee a written statement of employment particulars. But sometimes slip through the net, and a manager or a member of HR finds the only contract in file is the one signed on behalf of the company, or perhaps not even that. It can lead to some difficult conversations and finger pointing, but isn't necessarily disastrous. Just before I come to the consequences of an unsigned contract, it's actually not that difficult if you're willing to be a bit hard-nosed about it, to get an employee to sign a contract. And I always say, remember this, key point, who's the boss? It's you, not them. So don't let them start work until they've signed the contract. On day one, take them into a room as part of their induction and say, you haven't signed your contract. Why not? And if they say, well, I wanted to think about this clause, well, I wanted to speak to my lawyer, whatever it might be, your response is, well, you've not signed your contract. Sign it or go home. Come back tomorrow with it signed. If you don't come back tomorrow with it signed, you're gone. And that works. Most people will come back tomorrow with it signed or sign it just then, because most people who don't sign contracts don't have any real objections to them. They just don't like the idea of signing contracts. You're the boss. You insist on what you want, you get the contract signed. If you've got someone who's being difficult about signing a contract, my goodness, that's an indication they're likely to be a difficult employee further down the line. You might just have saved yourself a lot of trouble later on. They may well have a legitimate objection. They might say, I don't like this clause that says I can't compete for a year after leaving, or I can't take any clients with me because I'm bringing all my clients with me here. If I were to leave, I'd want to be able to take them elsewhere. Or they might not like a clause that says you cannot take holiday over the 2 weeks in August. They might want to negotiate that. If they have proper objections, speak to them, discuss them, negotiate them, and either reach consensus, in which case you amend the contract and get it signed, or don't, in which case you haven't got a binding agreement and it's good by them because they're not willing to be employed on terms on which you're willing to employ them. But back to the problem of the unsigned contract. The question is, did the employee intend to accept the terms in the contract? If they simply started working in line with the contract and continued to do so without questioning the agreement, the chances are they're deemed to have accepted the terms. And even if they'd objected to some of the terms, it's still possible that they will be found to be working under the contract. If an employee signs the contract but marks on it they don't agree to a particular clause, it's likely the contract will be enforceable apart from that clause, although it depends on the circumstances. There's less likely to be deemed acceptance if you've altered an existing employee's contract and the employee simply continues to work under it without formally accepting the change, especially where the change is detrimental to the employee. A common example is where you try to add additional restrictive covenants to employees that require some form of benefit passing from the employer, from you. And I look at this in more detail in Module 2 and Module 3. Contracts should bring certainty, and the problem with not having a signed contract is you can't be completely sure what the position is. Is the employee likely to dispute some of the provisions if things go wrong? Will you be able to enforce those important post-termination restrictions if need be? Getting the contractual arrangement in place at the beginning of a person's employment is key to the employment relationship working out. Be open about the terms you want to agree. If any of them are met with opposition, as I said, deal with it there and then. It might mean negotiating something different, or if the term is a deal breaker, walk away. The one thing you should not do is cross your fingers and hope for the best. Relying on implied agreement to terms is never a good option. And that's why making sure your organisation has the systems in place so that contracts for everyone, junior to senior, are signed, collected in and filed as a matter of course is so important. Word of warning, if you've got an HR department, you're likely to be held to a higher standard than a business that doesn't. Module 2 on agreeing changes covers why changes might be needed, starting the process, flexibility and mobility clauses, and getting the employer's agreement. Module 3 covers imposing changes, and Module 4 covers changes following a TUPE transfer. I'll see you in the next module.